just let me know.
Okay. Testing. Mic check. Testing, testing. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mic check, mic check, mic check. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. As such, we are proud and honored to announce a new federal, state, and city partnership to protect children and young adults from the ravages of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Joining me here today is the Attorney General of the State of California, Rob Bonta, from the Department of Justice, the Sacramento Police Chief, Kathy Lester, Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent in Charge, Tatum King. We also have the special honor of having several Assembly members here, Stephanie Nguyen, Maggie Krell, and our State Senator, Angelique Ashby. Also in attendance is Sawan Vaden, who's the Executive Director of Community Against Human Trafficking, Sexual Harm, CASH. And we are also blessed to have Amy Lurseth from Clear Channel here as well. So let me begin by introducing one of the best partners that we could have in regards to fighting human trafficking, and that is the Attorney General of the State of California, the People's Prosecutor, Rob Bonta.
Good morning. Thank you, District Attorney Ho, for the friendship, the collaboration, the partnership, for the very kind introduction. It's wonderful to be here with everybody. Thank you to all of you for coming out on this morning to join us. As District Attorney Ho mentioned, we're here today to announce the establishment of the Sacramento Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, a team that DOJ is proud to lead and one of 3 task forces that we've joined to combat all forms of human trafficking and the sexual exploitation of all people. We do this up and down the state, and I'm grateful we're doing it here in Sacramento. I do want to take a moment to extend my appreciation to our law enforcement partners who this critical work couldn't be done without. We're at our best when we work together, when we team up, when we use our resources for force multipliers. We can do a lot more together than we can on our own. So I'm so grateful for the partnership. I want to especially shout out the Sacramento Police Department, Sacramento County District Attorney's Office, and San Francisco's Homeland Security Investigations. And definitely want to thank our Sacramento leaders in the Assembly and the Senate who've joined us here today, who've been working on this issue and fighting for human trafficking survivors and to hold offenders accountable for years and years. Assemblymember Maggie Krell deserves a very special shout out. She and I worked together on human trafficking legislation when I was a legislator and before she joined the legislature. Assemblymember Stephanie Nguyen and of course State Senator Angelique Ashby. I just can't give them enough credit and want to uplift their great work in this space and many other spaces. Together, we are all working to tackle this unacceptable crisis of decency and dignity, this abomination and horrific crime that's happening right here, right now, in our own communities, in our own backyards. As California's Chief Law Enforcement Officer, public safety is job number 1, number 2, and number 3. It's our North Star. I believe there are 2 equally important components to fighting for justice for survivors of trafficking, helping survivors heal and recover, and preventing vulnerable victims or vulnerable individuals from becoming victims of crime. The devastating toll that these crimes are taking on our communities must be brought to a halt. Human trafficking is estimated to be a $150 billion a year global industry. Between 2015 and 2020, there were more than 13,000 sex trafficking victims in Sacramento County alone. But even more pervasive than this heinous crime is our combined commitment to end it, to tackle it, to confront it. In Sacramento, local law enforcement and DOJ agents have been working hard to hold traffickers accountable and assist victims. Since 2021, the work of our task forces have led to 707 arrests and 791 survivors given assistance. Now that there's a formal task force here in Sacramento, law enforcement will have more resources and more support to scale this critical work, to maximize and grow our impact. Our objective is to use our shared intelligence to increase the total number of human trafficking investigations and prosecutions within the Sacramento area, and to hold perpetrators of human trafficking to account. It's vital that we focus our efforts in a manner that is trauma-informed and culturally competent. That's why our task force members receive specialized training and experience to appropriately handle these cases with a victim-centered approach that includes sensitivity, compassion, and care for survivors. That can be as simple as reminding a young person who has been sexually exploited that they're not in trouble, and law enforcement is here to help, or as simple as giving them a warm, comfortable place to talk and something to eat. United will ensure that those who violate the law face the consequences of their actions. We'll ensure that survivors have access to the resources they need to heal, to move forward, and will ensure that our justice system is just for survivors. Through collaboration with federal, state, and local law enforcement partners and community organizations, DOJ has launched 2 regional human trafficking and sexual predator apprehension teams, our SPAT teams. We continue to serve as a lead agency on the San Diego Human Trafficking Task Force, and we're prosecuting complex, multi-jurisdictional, and criminal human trafficking cases across the state, including both sex and labor trafficking. DOJ is also providing new and continued resources for survivors. We've launched California's first ever sexual assault evidence kit tracking portal. We've put our vacator guidance to help survivors with a record of nonviolent offenses clear their records and secure relief if the offense was a result of being trafficked, of being victimized. And we're supporting survivors at every stage of the healing and justice process. We're disrupting and dismantling human trafficking, empowering each survivor and taking down many predators at a time. Our Victim Services Unit works day in and day out to assist survivors and their families, collaborating with direct service providers and state and local partners to help victims and survivors access trauma-informed care, mental health services, victim compensation, and more. Through these actions and others, we're supporting survivors, supporting our law enforcement partners, and supporting the safety of our communities. While we've yet to reach the finish line, we've come a long way in our fight for justice. And that's in large part because of task forces like this. Today we join forces with one shared pursuit: putting a stop to this heinous crime and securing justice for survivors. I know that together we can get it done, and that we will. Thank you, and now I'll pass it over to Sacramento Police Chief Kathy Lester.
Actually, I'm going to call an audible, and I'm going to ask and introduce a friend of public safety, Assemblymember Maggie Krell. Prior to be joining the Assembly, she was an assistant. She was a Deputy Attorney General prosecuting human trafficking. Assemblymember Krell.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Earlier this morning, I actually got a call from a survivor leader who I've worked with for years to tell me about a victim who got hit by a car on a blade in Fresno. And basically, she was out there, and I tell you this story because it's an example of how disposable people are being treated out on tracks here in Sacramento and throughout California. I know victims who have been trafficked within a few blocks of where we're standing right now, and the trauma that it has on these victims, what they go through, what they endure, and what it takes for them to overcome and rebuild their lives. And I've been doing this work for years, for decades even, and it continues to be a scourge. And what I can tell you is that one of the best solutions that I have to this is what we're doing right here, and that's collaboration. It's when state, local, and federal law enforcement, together with victim service providers, all unify to really tackle the problem, to hold offenders accountable, and to give victims and survivors the support and the resources that are needed long-term to rebuild their lives. This task force here in Sacramento, it's been a long time coming. It's something that this community sorely has needed, and I'm so grateful for our District Attorney Ho's leadership and collaboration with Attorney General Bonta and his office in getting this done. This partnership is going to do really meaningful work. I appreciate them bringing me to the table as a new legislator. This will continue to be my focus, and to my partners up here, you have a champion in the California legislature. Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Assemblymember Stephanie Nguyen, who is another friend and advocate to public safety representing Sacramento.
Thank you. First, I want to thank District Attorney Tien Ho for bringing us all together here. Folks, we stand here in South Sacramento, and I grew up not too far away from here. And I can tell you this, as a little girl, I watched as other little girls and other women get trafficked. And to me, that was normal. I'm going to say that again. To me, that was normal. I grew up with that. And that's not okay, because I watched that and I didn't know that there was something wrong with that. And that was decades ago. And we stand here today, and this still happens day in and day out, where we see folks being trafficked. Right here on these grounds right now. And so this task force is a game changer. It's a game changer because it's going to hold those who are trafficking victims accountable. It's a game changer because it's going to support victims and survivors. As a legislator, and as my other legislators stand here with me, as our Attorney General, as our local police departments, Homeland Securities, and our district attorney stands here with me, I can tell you this, my office, my team, and we are committed to ensuring that our survivors get the wraparound services and the resources they need, not just today, not just tomorrow, but for the rest of their lives. Because we need to hold these traffickers accountable, but we need to bring justice where it belongs. And I stand here proud to say that we all will champion this, because we heard it earlier as our Attorney General said, there are billions of dollars being circulated into human trafficking. And I'm proud to share that we are going to run legislation around asset forfeiture, where we will hold those accountable and not let them profit a single dime anymore in doing these crimes. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank District Attorney Tien Ho for leading this and for pulling us all together.
And now I'd like to introduce you State Senator Angelique Ashby, a champion of public safety. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having us here today. And if you don't already know this, Attorney General Bonta is one of the busiest elected officials in the United States of America right now. The last 8 days have been a sprint for him. So I want to personally thank you for everything you're doing to represent California, our legislature, and the values that we hold near and dear in this golden state. I also want to point out that this is the first time in the history of the state of California and in Sacramento that the delegation for Sacramento, which is the three of us, these two assemblywomen and myself, is all female. That has never happened before. This is the first time, and all three of us are champions in this space, and we were before we earned these titles. So you can expect a three-part punch from your two assemblywomen and your senator. I'd like to give you two examples of how the legislature can help on these issues and how we already have. One, budget's our statement of values. I think we can all agree on that. Press conferences are important because we convey information, but part of conveying that information is also where are we putting our dollars. This week, we gave extra money to the DOJ department to address a lot of issues, including how people are being treated across our state. And in the last legislative session, the state of California gave $8 million to at least one provider here in Sacramento that specializes in the space of working with victims. An agency that Assemblywoman Krell and I both have a long relationship with and know to do amazing work. And then lastly, I ran a piece of legislation last year that passed. It was built off of a model that Sutter Hospital started here in Sacramento County, where they worked with people coming in to receive services to identify victims of human sex trafficking. And just in a couple of short years, they were able to help dozens of women and some children escape violent environments. Last year, the California State Legislature voted to make that bill mandatory on all acute care hospitals, so every ER in the state of California will now do that screening. This is how Sacramento leads. We are so fortunate to have DA Tin Ho, who is an extraordinary leader in public safety and Sacramento. I thank you for being here today.
This task force would not have been possible but for the leadership of Sacramento Chief of Police Kathy Lester, and I'd ask her to say a few words.
Thank you. Good morning. I really just want to thank District Attorney Tin Ho for bringing us all together today. As you can see, there's some amazing leadership that feels very, very strongly about supporting and challenging and fighting against human trafficking. We are here really to address an issue, and I thank you all for coming today, because without you, we couldn't get this message across. And that's about human trafficking. It's a crime that is happening in our neighborhoods, in our cities, and certainly to many of our most vulnerable community members. We are proud as the Sacramento Police Department to stand alongside all of our partners here in the Sacramento Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, which will include the Department of Justice, our Homeland Security Investigations, and the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office. By working together, I know that we can take meaningful action against this crisis, and it's absolutely a crisis, and bring justice to victims. January, as many of you know, is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and this is a time to shine a light on this crime, a crime that often goes hidden. It's an opportunity to support survivors and to strengthen our commitment to ending exploitation in our communities. And I'll talk about the scope of the problem. You know, what is human trafficking? It's the exploitation of people through force, through fraud, through coercion, for labor or commercial sex. And as you've heard, a recent study from Sac State found that more than 13,000 people in Sacramento County alone were believed to be the victims of sex trafficking between 2015 and 2020. And I can tell you, those are victims that we know about, and there's more that are out there, and we need to help them. The reality is that traffic is not something that happens somewhere else. It's happening in our communities, where we live, where we raise our families, where we work. And unfortunately, many people don't know much about the extent of this problem, this issue. And that's why today's press conference and this task force is so important. It's about bringing awareness to this issue, it's about taking action, and it's ultimately about holding traffickers accountable and seeking justice for their victims. The Sacramento Police Department has been and remains committed to fighting human trafficking. Since the creation of our own human trafficking unit in 2020, we have filed nearly 100 cases, with 69 formally charged, resulting in a conviction rate of about 70% as of now. And many of these cases are still moving through the court process. And we have amazing partners with our district attorney and our fellow law enforcement partners. So now, through this regional task force, we are strengthening that commitment. Alongside these partners, we are going to coordinate our efforts to rescue victims and continue to build strong cases against traffickers. Our detectives, as part of this task force, are going to be focusing on several key areas, including using their expertise to put solid cases together for prosecution and make arrests of those who exploit others for profit. We also use trauma-informed and victim-centered approaches to support survivors, targeting not just traffickers, but also those who demand and drive demand by exploiting victims. And we will work to disrupt the role that gangs and organized crime play in human trafficking. I'd like to share a case that underscores exactly why this task force is so critical. In September of 2023, Dominic Roberson was sentenced to 71 years to life in prison for human trafficking and a series of violent offenses. His conviction was the result of relentless investigation led by our human trafficking unit, a very strong relationship with our district attorney, and most importantly, the bravery of the survivor who came forward. Roberson's crimes followed a pattern that we see far too often: preying on a vulnerable young woman and then building false trust before using threats, violence, and manipulation to exploit her. He isolated her, he controlled every aspect of her life, he even targeted her family with threats to keep her from escaping. But thanks to a vigilant healthcare provider who recognized the warning signs and an experienced team of investigators who acted very quickly, this survivor was able to get the help she needed and be able to bring Roberson to justice. And this case highlights why we need a dedicated human trafficking task force, so we can work quickly across agencies, that we can respond the right way, and we can give survivors a way out. Human trafficking is a complex crime, but with a coordinated effort, we can hold traffickers accountable and certainly protect the most vulnerable in our community. Human trafficking thrives in secrecy, so the more that we talk about it, the harder it becomes for traffickers to operate. So today's conference and having all of you here, and this task force is really an essential step towards shining a light on this issue, holding offenders accountable, and ensuring that victims receive the support that they need to rebuild their lives. And at the Sacramento Police Department, we are certainly committed to the fight. We know we can't do it alone. We need continued support from our community, whether it's reporting suspicious activity, supporting survivor services, or simply helping to raise awareness. We will not tolerate human trafficking in our city, and we will continue to work with our partners to bring in every resources that we have to combat this crime and bring justice to those who need it most. Thank you for being here today.
This task force includes not only our local jurisdictions and partners, not only our state partners, but also our federal partners. So with that, I'd like to introduce the Special Agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigation, Tatum King.
To quote Chief Lester, it's a beautiful day to shine the light on the darkness of human trafficking. So Tatum King, Homeland Security Investigations, based out of our San Francisco office, really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today with these, the DA, the AG, Chief Lester, the elected officials. We know it does take a village, and including our community-based organizations, again, law enforcement at all levels. Really, where HSI comes in is on the international nexus of these criminal organizations, right? We know that many of them, operate overseas. They make threats to families maybe that are based overseas. Maybe the victims are foreign nationals without status. Our resources are there to protect the victims, provide them the support they need, as well as go after that entire criminal enterprise. We, most importantly, for folks out there, for victims, again, that are non-citizens, is to provide them a continued presence, to provide them employment authorization documents so they can hopefully get some sort of a living wage, maybe help reunify family members, as well as maybe seek federal prosecutions where the DA/HO feels it's appropriate. Really, the key is partnership, as you've heard from all our elected officials here and our law enforcement today is a partnership. Really, it's in the community. Most importantly, is community, right? Getting the word out. See something, say something, right? We have DHS utilizes the Blue campaign. It's DHS.gov/Blue campaign for information to the community, to businesses, etc., on red flag indicators. I have one of our human trafficking cards here. So that way folks can, number one, get the word out. Number two, see how they can help in the community that they live in the workplace, in the schools, etc. Again, most importantly is, reach out to 911 for your law enforcement on the ground here to get support. Also was mentioned the issue with kids. We know that kids are also victims of human trafficking. HSI has another program called Know to Protect, KNOW2, the number 2, Protect. That's also information for kids, caregivers, educators as well, how to stay safe on the internet. We know that online sexploitation is out of control. Here in the U.S., maybe going back to other countries overseas as well. So we want to arm folks at home with the tools they need to protect themselves and their loved ones. I mentioned our victim support. HSI employs victim assistance specialists, essentially our social workers on the federal side, to work with our partners at the DA's office, at the AG's office, most importantly the police department, to make sure, again, those victims are getting the support, and community collaborating with the community-based organizations. Also, there's a limit really on what law enforcement can provide to victims of human trafficking, so we really heavily rely on those community-based organizations to provide those resources and support, whether it be clothing, medical care, vocational care, etc. So really the CBOs are absolutely key. In addition, they're able to bridge the gap. Maybe there's a lack of trust with law enforcement, and we see that a lot. We see a frequent a threat to folks is to contact immigration authorities if an individual is undocumented. So we really rely on those trusted partners with CBOs, so that way those individuals feel comfortable, those victims feel comfortable in reaching out to get the support and the care they need, and most importantly, hold those transnational criminal organizations accountable for their heinous acts. Again, I want to thank the DA Ho, AG Bonta, Chief Lester, I know Chief Woolery here as well from the AG's office for all their work. And without great legislation from our legislators, we can't do this. We need strong laws. As a resident of California, I appreciate the work that they do, again, to hold these violators accountable. So, you know, we're proud to be a member of the Sacramento Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, and we're looking to bring that federal aspect, that federal hammer, to make sure these violators are held to account.
Before we open up for questions, I do want to say a few words. Human trafficking is a human atrocity. It is a crime against humanity itself, and some have said that it is a form of modern-day slavery. Through violence, through fear, through coercion, through fraud, people have been exploited, the most vulnerable among us. Several of us have cited a statistic that was done from a survey and a study that was done by CASH, Community Against Sexual Harm, in which we found that over a 5-year period in Sacramento County, there have been over 13,000 victims of sexual trafficking, and that number is grossly underrated and underreported. And although we talk about these numbers, since 2023, when I came into office, my office has prosecuted nearly 100 human trafficking cases. And when we talk about these data, and when we talk about this information and these numbers, we picked this location for a very specific reason. This location is part of what we call the Blade, the area where human trafficking victims are forced to stroll up and down the street. And we picked this location for a very specific reason, because right across the street, in that parking lot across the street, there was a young woman named Sarah who was a victim of sexual trafficking, beaten and forced by her exploiter to commit a sexual act at 4:30 in the afternoon in that parking lot in public. We identified that individual, we prosecuted that individual, we held them accountable, and through the use of community-based organizations, we were able to get the victim off the street. So this isn't just some number, and this isn't just a press conference. This is a collaboration. For the first time ever in Sacramento County's history, we have a regional task force that is going to address human trafficking on multiple different levels. Each of the partners here are dedicated to providing the resources. From the Sacramento DA's office, we were providing 2 full-time prosecutors along with an investigator, a victim advocate. And each of the partners will be providing additional resources. And our goal is to increase the number of investigation and prosecution. Our goal and our mission is to go after those perpetrators. Our goal is to be able to help victims in a trauma-informed manner. And our goal and our mission will be accomplished, but we will do it together. You know, there's a saying that you can educate one person, but by doing so, you will empower many. So this isn't just about enforcement. It isn't just about intervention. It's about education. And this month, we are starting at the District Attorney's Office a prosecutor podcast called Off the Record. And that particular podcast actually goes into detail about the case that happened right across the street from us. It has a 911 call. It has a video on Instagram Live, and it brings behind-the-scene images and behind-the-scene view of real-life cases and real-life issues, because we need to educate. And by doing so, we will empower. We will empower each other to lift each other up, to make sure that another child, that another young adult will never have to fear being exploited either sexually or through labor trafficking. And so I thank each of the partners up here for coming together to do just this. And with that, I'll open it up for questions that you may have for the partners up here. Yes.
Any that are complying with it? So first, let me say I don't think I referenced immigration, but happy to answer your question. we expect all of our law enforcement departments and agencies to follow the law of the state of California. We're grateful for everything they do to enforce the law. Certainly expect them to follow the law. Not aware of any department or agency that is not complying with SB 54, and expect that to continue to be true. Our job is to enforce the law, all laws, including SB 54. And if SB 54 is violated, and again, I have no belief or expectation that it won't be followed, but if it's not, we will take action to make sure it's followed. I don't think so. I think maybe there could be some confusion or ambiguity. I think clarity, facts, the actual law, and understanding it is most important. I think that is very well and broadly understood. SB 54 is not a new law. It's been in place for years now. Local law enforcement and state law enforcement have been following it for years. And sometimes there's some statements from the federal administration that put some ambiguity or concern. We've received incoming requests to clarify. We appreciate that opportunity to clarify what the law is. But the way the actual law operates, there is no ambiguity. The federal government has every right to lawfully enforce immigration laws. And SB 54 clearly states that, with some exceptions, local law enforcement and state law enforcement will not be participating in that immigration enforcement. That provides them the opportunity to focus their resources on fighting crime and also building trust with communities, so witnesses come forward and victims come forward. So I don't believe there's any confusion in the way the actual law works, but I understand in this world of misinformation and disinformation that there could be ambiguity, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide clarity when that occurs.
So first of all, I do want to address something. I'm an immigrant, born in another country, a refugee who came to this country. I grew up on the east side of San Jose in the Bay Area, and I remember taking my mom to the DMV, taking my mom to the doctor and having to translate for her because she couldn't speak English. And I remember when crime showed up on our doorstep, we didn't contact the police because we were afraid of dealing with law enforcement and being deported. And what I can tell you is this, and this is a message to the victims of crime in our community. Please contact the police. Please call 911, because we are here to make sure that your voices are heard. We don't ask, we don't inquire, we don't bring up about your immigration status. We want to make sure that you are protected from those that prey upon you, whether you are documented or undocumented. And that's a message that I want all of our community members to hear loud and clear. But in regards to your question about collaboration, we've been doing that for years. For several years, Courtney Martin was in charge of our human trafficking prosecution unit. And now we have 2 additional prosecutors there. And we've worked with CASH and other community-based organizations. We have a reset court in juvenile hall to try to get the victims who are juveniles, not to prosecute them criminally, but to try to get them from, these perpetrators and these exploiters. So we work hand in hand with community organizations to get the victims of sexual exploitation off the streets. And so we do it hand in hand. We'll continue to do so every step of the way. Next question. Yes. I'm gonna ask Chief Lester to comment on some of the investigation.
You know, that is a tough question to answer. And I think it goes to the fact that there's a lot that goes on that we don't know about, you know. And as the district attorney mentioned in their first podcast, they were talking about the victim that had come forward and how lots of times victims don't present as traditional victims seeking law enforcement help. It takes a community like the healthcare provider that I talked about. It takes officers that are on the streets that recognize that something's not quite right, something someone in a school to follow up on something that doesn't seem quite right either. And so I think that it's really hard to understand the scope of the problem. But I can say with a task force like this and the support, as we are able to develop more cases, certainly there is a report that will be issued as part of this task force every March. And we hope to understand the problem better. We know right now it's a crisis. You know, for us at the police department, it's often victims of sexual trafficking that we encounter, but we know that that is not the one instance of any of people that are being trafficked for various reasons. But we do hope to find out more.
I can tell you that the vast majority of the trafficking cases that we see in Sacramento County have been of a sexual nature, sexual exploitation. They involved individual exploiters. They also involve gangs, criminal street gangs that are involved. But we will be exploring, we'll be investigating and multiplying essentially all of our resources and expertise together to go after it. But that's the majority. But there have been cases, and we will be looking at labor trafficking as well. That's an important aspect. Yes.
The key here is the collaboration and the force multiplication. We are dedicating a certain number of individuals from our team to the task force. Others are doing that as well. Together, it creates a team that will share intelligence, will share resources, will share strategy, will make our investigations enhanced and our prosecutions amplified and greater in number. So instead of being in separate silos, so working on our own, doing important work, we're able to team up and have a greater impact. And this is a vision that's not just imagined, it's been manifested already in places, other places throughout the state, including San Diego, where we've had a great team of law enforcement personnel working together. And I shared some of the outcomes, the over 700 arrests, over 700 survivors that were given services. That's a result of the teamwork. But we are dedicating resources, personnel. We'll be working in concert, sharing best information, best practices, best intelligence to detect, dismantle, deter human trafficking in all its forms here in Sacramento.
So each of the partners will be providing personnel. So from the DA's office, we'll have 2 full-time prosecutor, an investigator, a victim advocate. The Department of Justice will be providing not only office space, but they'll also be providing as well a commander of the task force from Attorney General Bonta's office. The Sacramento Police Department, along with Homeland Security as well, will be providing resources and analysts as well to really move this forward. And those are important assets. Next question. No other questions? Then we will end the press conference, but some of us will be available for one-on-one interviews afterwards as well, if you want to reach out to us right here. So thank you so much, and we look forward to really working together. Thank you.
Great job, Ian. Thank you.